Thanks very much for speaking to me, especially with you being a bit poorly. So thanks very much. And
For
thanks
having
very much
me.
for the book as well. And congratulations on the book. I loved it to bits. And you knocked it out of the park. You completely took me by surprise as well, again. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. That's wonderful to hear.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just, well, you always hope that the last thing you do is the best thing you do. That's your hope anyway.
Yeah.
But I think I do think that this might be my best one.
Hmm.
I don't know, that's my hope anyway.
Well, when you say best, I mean, because you got quite emotional then when I said that. I loved it to bits. I imagine it's also possibly your most personal one. Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, it is a little. I didn't know if I would ever finish it actually, or whether I could ever write again,
Hmm.
without being too overdramatic. My mother was very ill with cancer for many, many years, and we all took care of her. But I was about halfway through this book when she came home for the last time. So I put it,
Right.
and we all, we were with her, and but then afterwards, I couldn't pick it up again. I just couldn't. I
Yeah.
actually, as I said, I didn't know if I could ever write anything ever again, because it was just,
Really?
yeah. I think it's a huge landmark, a big Rubicon that you cross. Like, and I don't know. I actually felt really bad for people in my past, who've lost a parent, a beloved parent, and you sort of, unless you've gone through it, you sort of just go, oh dear, oh, that what a shame,
Yeah.
right? And but you don't realize what a scar it leaves in you forever, really. Anyway, I just yeah, it took me a long time to get back to it, and also to come back to something that's halfway finished as well is very odd,
Yeah,
and
I mean, it's
particularly
hard enough just to, sorry to interrupt, but it's hard to
no, exactly,
just to
yeah.
dive back into a book halfway. Once I've read half a book, I've left it for a week or so. I'm like, I don't know if I want to go back into it again. Yeah, it's really difficult. So
Yeah,
writing a book must be about 10 times more difficult. Yeah,
exactly. And when something so big has happened, between you putting it down and picking it up again, so I just sort of sat down at the desk and I just wrote. I mean, to be honest, like, can I swear? Am I allowed?
oh, yeah, no, no problem, no problem
Yeah.
at all. Yeah,
I wrote just so much shit. I really did. It was really bad. But I just kept showing up, and showing
hmm,
up. Thinking if I keep doing it, it will get done. And
yeah,
eventually, it came to me, and that was when to be honest, as you say, it became very personal, and I think that was what it needed really. But the trouble with writing is like you don't always want to open the door to
yeah.
all, you know. Um,
But at
but
the same time, I guess it must be very. Sorry, I keep interrupting you. It must be
please go
really,
ahead,
it
please.
must be really cathartic at the same time because I know that means so much to you to leave that story behind because you don't want to kind of remember the time that you lost your mother. But at the same time, it must be great to be able to, even if it's just shit at the bit to start with, it must be great to be able to get that off your chest, even if it's just into onto paper, no, onto the computer, into Word.
Exactly, well, exactly, but also to realize that I can write now again, and I'm
Yeah,
not, it's not over, and one of the last things she said to me was, "Don't stop writing." So
right.
I had to try.
Mm.
But I'm really cautiously, oh, one is always cautiously, I'm very cautiously proud of it. So
Yeah. Well, you should be. You shouldn't be cautiously proud. You should be very, very proud of it. It's really, really good, honestly.
it's very,
Um, I'm quite. I mean, I don't obviously don't want to. I don't like to pry too much into people's personal lives. I wasn't expecting you to to open up so much so quickly, but I appreciate that. But can I ask you what got you to dive back into it after kind of closing the door on that book and not wanting to write that and not even to write again until quite a bit afterwards?
I mean, apparently it's a job, not a hobby. So, they can't pay you for things you didn't write. No, I mean, the thing is, I felt that I, I just felt I'd lost it. Yeah, you're right. Sorry, I didn't mean to launch on
No,
you.
no,
So
no. I appreciate you being such an open book. But yeah, I wasn't expecting it. Yeah,
it's difficult to talk about the book without
sure.
talking about that,
Yeah,
unfortunately. But so I didn't want to lose any more than I'd lost, and I wanted to, if not to be too um, sentimental, but I wanted to make her proud. And um, there were there was no way to make her proud by sitting there moping and just not writing, you know.
Mhm.
So I just tried and tried and tried and tried. But also I had these sort of um I had these ideas which fed into the narrative really interestingly for me anyway, because I don't know, sometimes a very personal thing can sort of set off all sorts of fireworks in your brain, can't it?
Yeah.
And I suddenly realized that it was Peter Pan. I suddenly realized it was, you know, and the cruelty of Peter Pan is quite extraordinary, actually. Have you
Mhm.
read
Yeah, yeah, I have read it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
it?
hadn't read it for a long time ago, since a long, yeah, for a while, but yeah.
It's mental. It's really like there's a whole like page and a half about how they can't work out whether they can afford to keep Wendy when she's born. So they
Hmm.
have a discussion, a debate about what she's worth. You know,
Yeah.
it's very cruel, and there's lots of killing, and there's lots of because I think childhood is quite savage. You know, it can be. And Lord of the Flies shows us that, doesn't it? You know,
Sure.
that
Hmm.
when you don't have the love and the guidance that you need, ch the unmoored nature of children can be
Yeah.
terrifying. You
I
know,
was just reading the Wasp Factory the other day as well, and that was again the same kind of thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Uh-huh.
I
So,
mean, yeah.
I mean, the first question that I asked, I don't hope it doesn't get you too emotional as well, but it really kind of hit me was the epigraph that you chose at the beginning of the book as well. Childhood is the kingdom where nobody dies. Was that already intentionally there, or was that something that you decided to put as the epigraph after the fact?
It came a little later, and because the whole kind of the close-knit connection with Peter Pan came a little later because, what is Peter Pan as an idea except for evading death? What is wanting to be a child forever except evading death?
Hmm.
I've come towards the thing is, this like eternal childhood is stasis and eternal life is stasis. We only like you don't have evolution if you don't have death.
Yeah.
It's part of, how we
Hmm.
how we exist and how we adjust to life on this planet. So I, there was this kind of I just I had a negotiation with that idea, which I thought that quote really encapsulated it.
Hmm. I'm quite curious. And then, I mean, you mentioned Peter Pan there. Was Peter Pan always intentionally the kind of the inspiration for the story, or was that something that came later on as well? Because you said you kind of half written this story. Was that always intentionally kind of Peter Pan inspired there, or was that something that kind of really bled into the story later on?
It was always there in the bones of it, but I suddenly realized after the fact that I had to lean into it much more. Like it was basically a sort of off-center retelling of Peter Pan.
Hmm.
And that actually, if you're going to have because it is such a potent and kind of terrible and grand idea, if you're going to have it, like do it. Don't just
Yeah.
do it. So
Hmm.
it was there, but I decided I decided to, to actually kind of maximize it.
But it's very much kind of laying down the gauntlet for yourself because you've got to kind of live up to that story. And if you really do lean into it, you've
Mm.
got to be able to make sure that it doesn't feel like it's just a tip of the hat, tip of the hat, tip of the hat, one after. You're going to really make it your own. And these characters are really because I wasn't a huge. I was when you said it was inspired by Peter Pan. I was hoping that it was, but at the same time it wasn't because I wanted something
Right.
really original. Obviously, I expected something that was going to surprise me from you because of the ways that you've kind of knocked me from you pulled the rug from under me quite a few times before, so I was really pleasantly surprised. But I mean, you must have found yourself second guessing yourself a lot to make sure that it wasn't too. I mean, you said you wanted to lean more into it as the story kind of progressed. How did you approach leaning into it without leaning into it too much, so that it's not just kind of a too over referential, if you will?
Well, I didn't worry too much about sort of mirroring the story exactly page by page or word for word. I didn't worry about that at all. I think the idea, sorry, sorry, Uh, excuse me, I'm
Okay.
dying. Um, I I didn't worry too much about that. I just what there are just several key ideas, and also this, like for instance, well, this the eternal childhood but also and the cruelty and the brutality of I mean of being a child, but also certain images which are so potent, like there is it's not too much of a spoiler, there is a crocodile, and
Right.
not being afraid to lean into the slightly hallucinatory nature and fairy tale nature of it. Because I think being alive and certainly being young is slightly unreal. I don't know that the world is, well, I don't know the world is particularly real for anyone really, but certainly for people whose minds are growing and developing, the difference between imagination and reality has a really thin skin.
Yeah. Hmm.
So, and I thought, well, and that's why these narratives are so powerful. Lord of the Flies and Peter Pan, that's why they're so plausible as well, is because um, the escalation from normality and living a cozy life with your mum and dad, and then killing Piggy in the forest.
Yeah.
It's actually it's not there's not that many steps between them.
Hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So I just wanted to lend that air of unreality to it, and also borrow these really potent images like the crocodile who's
Hmm.
haunting her. Um, but in order to give it that sense of otherworldliness.
Beside the other wilderness, there's a lot of kind of very on the nose topics that you touch. I don't want to get too, don't want to spoil too much, but obviously the main character, well, one of the main kind of, I don't know if we can call it the antagonist, one of the kind of the head of this nowhere land,
Yeah.
Leaf Winham,
Yeah.
it feels like very, very much on the nose. So I'm quite curious how you went about writing that character without tipping too much into sensationalism, if you will.
Well, yeah, that's a really good question because that was a real concern of mine because I didn't want it to be. It's not about it. It's a fiction. It's a story. It's not.
Hmm.
It's not related to any particular person. But I did get part of the reason when I first started writing it was when we were driving through wine country and in California, and my brother-in-law just pointed at this it was like a dirt track leading off to the right, very unremarkable, not signposted, and he went, "Oh, that's Neverland." I was like,
Hmm.
"What?" And I said, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, yeah, no, that's Neverland." And it was so strange because it doesn't seem like a place with an actual physical, you know,
Yeah.
like being. It's a concept rather than a location, It
Yeah.
doesn't seem possible that you can go up a dirt track and find it.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
just kept thinking, what happens there? I mean, I do know what goes on there very roughly because you can find it on, by Googling it, but well, my book is much more interesting. But um, I kept thinking what on earth happens in this kind of derelict playground, in this, in the remains of this kind of great um, persona and empire.
Hmm.
And I wondered if it could be, you could have this counterpoint between, people, children who need who need safety and salvation, finding it at a place where, you know, that is imbued with the opposite of those
Yeah.
things.
Hmm.
So, but I mean, it's very much, Leaf Winham has absolutely nothing to do with the real person. I was very, very keen to make sure that it was separated out. But that feeling of unreality, again, and that's not something that I've come up with. It just is. Like the first, when I tried to tell people about it initially, about the idea for the book, they were like, wait, so what do you mean, Neverland? I was like, no, no, the actual, like, it's set sort of at a fictional version of that. And they were like, but and it's a really hard concept to grasp in a way that this place has a physical existence, and
Hmm.
it's so fantastic with imagery as well, isn't it? Like the abandoned fairground rides and
Yeah.
this sort of this sort of like overgrown playground left to the wilderness. So I mean, it gripped my imagination immediately. I thought it was such a good idea. But I mean, Leaf Winham is very difficult to write. It's very difficult to write someone who does. How do you write the unwritable? The terrible. It's really hard. And I thought the best way to do it would be to make sure you focus on the relationships as opposed to what he does.
Right.
Um, and what he wants from other people and what he does to them. That was my best way in. It's always difficult writing things like that because as you say, you never ever want to veer into this pointless salaciousness or
Yep.
or violence or you just it's really it makes it a bad book and
Just just distracts readers from the story in the end. Yeah.
no one exactly, yeah, yeah,
And then
yeah.
you end up getting a lot of people on on social media complaining about it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
But also there are people, I'm sure there are people, I'm always conscious of this as well. I never use any real crimes that have happened. I
yeah,
always invent them because there are people alive who are still affected by these things.
sure.
It's not a game. It's real life for some people, you know.
Hmm. Also, I mean, you mentioned that kind of representing the characters, but
Mm,
also the place itself is very much a character, and very
mm,
much you play with kind of the dark and the lights that the kids can find in this place. I'm quite curious. I mean, because like you said, this Michael Jackson's ranch, for example, Neverland, is this
mm,
place that everyone's kind of imagined in their own heads. I had my own
yeah.
imagination of it until I read this book. But I mean, how did you approach kind of creating this place that gives the sensation that it is a safe haven for these kids, but at the same time, there's this, it's like you said, imbued with violence and abuse there as well at the same time.
Well, I think so. I mean, first of all, like nature does half the work for you. I mean, most of nature just wants to kill you. That is its
Yeah,
job, and that's it. So putting it in the wild is a lot of the heavy lifting is done already. I mean, you've got literal lions, and there are lions, and isolation and disease and like a starvation and cold and snow. You've got so many things that can kill you, as like or in place already. That actually, you know, that sort of speaks to the choices they're making in itself. You don't go to a place, you don't isolate yourself like that unless you have real cause,
yeah,
and it's that thing about like character, plot is character and character is plot. So the reason they're there is because of what happened to them. And it's a brutal environment. And I think also there's always that tipping point, that sort of slight biting point of when a utopia becomes a dystopia. um, it's there's you can never sustain the equilibrium of a utopia for very long. It always kind of devolves into the human problems that plague us all, and like, jealousy, love, hatred, need for power, fear is a big one, hunger, greed, unfortunately, and all these things are just heightened and exacerbated by the place you're in, because you're surrounded by threat from all sides.
mhm. I also want to speak a little bit. I mean, obviously, I said to you before that you pulled the wolf under my you pulled the rug from under my feet quite a few times with your books. Going into this, well, going into every book, especially since kind of you really made a name for yourself for the twists in The Last House on Pine Street. I'm curious how you approach this, knowing that people are gonna. I mean, everyone goes into books expecting to be surprised, but when it comes to a Catriona Ward book, they're really, really kind of they know that there's going to be quite a few left
Misdirect,
field
yeah.
misdirections. Yeah, so I'm quite curious how you approach those to make sure that I guess you surprise yourself first and surprise the audience, but at the same time, you don't you don't end up with kind of twists for the sake of twists, which you never do. Do you know if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Because you really pulled the wool under my eyes, and I was like, I'm kicking myself, but in a good way, because I all these different clues that you've been kind of sketching throughout the book, they all fell into place. But for example, there's lots of films that I hate, films that they really throw you for
Yeah.
a completely misdirection that really, really doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So I'm quite curious how you make sure that you don't kind of fall down that pit hole.
Well, I think, I mean, there's lots to say here. Okay, so I think on a technical level, you have to have a sense of fair dealing. You can't suddenly spring something. I think I don't know. I think I prefer the word reveal to the word twist,
Yeah,
because what it should do is just show you what's been happening, as opposed to manipulating you.
yeah,
A reveal should transform the world, but in a way where you should feel simultaneously like, oh, holy shit, but also that's the only possible way that could have happened. That's the only possible outcome when you look back on it. And I sometimes I know what I'm going to do in advance. Sometimes I don't at all. I mean, the thing is, I find that kind of rug being pulled out from under you, I find it incredibly realistic. Like life is, it's constantly throwing you
It
these.
surprises, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't. I mean, even like today, the times I've just gone, nothing is as I thought it was.
Yeah.
I find that incredibly. Not, I don't think it doesn't feel like a device. It feels like a realism to me. So in order to create it, you just tell the truth. You never there should never ever be anything which is lying to the reader. You can present information in a certain way, but the truth is always there. And that's what makes it so kind of horrifying at the end, is because it was lying there in front of you all the time.
Yeah.
And I always think sometimes, I think, oh, with this one, I won't do a twist. But it just, I can't seem to stop. I
Yeah.
just find, I find it just such an incredibly relatable way of feeling. This terrible realization that everything is different than you thought it was.
No, I mean that's actually clear what it is. But not the way that you do it so well is the fact that, like you said, it just feels so realistic. It's that you like there's all these little clues that I can't obviously mention now that I'm just still kicking myself even 2, 3 weeks after I've read it, and I can't believe that I didn't realize that was. I mean, because there's 2 or 3 really really big clues
Now,
early on. Yeah,
I also think I'd never ever mind if people get it in
sure.
advance.
No,
Like,
yeah,
that's
you
great.
can't surprise everybody.
But
Yeah.
also, who cares? That's not the point. The point is not to sort of go da 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 da. Oh, fooled you. That's not it.
Yeah.
That I don't care about that. It's what's happening to the characters is their lives are transformed in this incredibly seminal and like anarchic way. And I find that terrifying in itself. As I said, it doesn't really matter if people figure it out in advance. I still think the impact for the narrative is the same. You're watching people deal with unthinkable, events and unthinkable deeds, and their entire world turned upside down. I think that's the point of it. It's not a trick or a sort of a sleight of hand, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm guessing that you never reverse engineer anything then. I'm guessing you kind of let it happen
Well,
organically.
well, I do. Yeah. I mean, what do you mean by that? Sorry.
It's very difficult not to talk about spoilers, but what I mean is because you've got all these
Do I
different
go back and
characters,
tweak? Like,
because you've got various perspectives in the
yeah,
story, for example, you've got various perspectives. So once certain things play out, it's kind of
yeah.
it must be difficult for that to happen organically because we've been with these characters from the very beginning. If you know what I mean, without giving any spoilers away, yeah.
I know what you mean. And someone asked me once how I plan things, and the things I don't at all. They were like, "You must have like a spider, like a graphs on the wall," and I'm like, "I don't
Yeah.
at all. I hold it all in my head, and if I can't hold it in my head, then it's not working."
Yeah,
It's
because
the
the readers aren't going to be able to do the same either. Yeah.
is Stephen King calls it the Darwinism of ideas.
Yeah.
But I do think that's right. And each narrative teaches you something about the rest, and you suddenly realize it's so strange. It's balancing your left and right brain with really delicate hands. That you're plumbing from the depths of yourself and your kind of subconscious, but you're also organizing very empirically with the other hand. It's a mystery. It's a
Yeah.
mystery.
Mhm. I mean, you kind of you surprise yourself. I'm guessing most of the time if you can
A lot of the
to
time,
help you
yeah.
keep writing. No, yeah,
Absolutely, and that's what I mean. I outline with a very light hand, and because I find that there is a sort of a strange order to it that emerges from your like you know it's working when suddenly you realize that you just accidentally or without intention written something that resonates really hard with another narrative. You're like, oh, great, okay, this is working because it's a whole now. It's a book.
Mhm.
It's speaking instead of just being a sort of like a series of disjointed narratives. It's speaking to it. The narratives are speaking to each other.
Uh-huh. And I guess you approach the same way with the different perspectives to make sure that they all seem together, because otherwise to make sure that they don't jar between each
And
perspective.
weirdly, like they rarely has that much. there's rarely that much kind of work to do at the end because
Hmm.
I'm thinking so hard about what's happening in each, like it's like watching cross currents in a stream,
Yeah.
intersecting. And I'm watching it so hard and thinking not just about the reader for sure, but also about the characters and how each narrative affects them. There's rarely that much to do at the end. Obviously, I have to read it through, and sometimes there are some absolute clangers. But usually, but I think less. Well, I mean, don't ask my editor, please. I'm sure she'd have a different opinion. It's kind of, I don't know. It's sort of once I've got it, I've got it. I mean, until I've got it, it's such a spaghetti mess. But once it's there, it's there.
Hmm. I mean, but also we touched on Peter Pan, the kind of inspiration of Peter Pan.
Mm.
I'm quite curious. I mean, I said before about how you approached making sure that it was very much your own story, even though it was inspired in Peter Pan. But how did you also, um, well, you kind of answered previously, but you said that Peter Pan was quite horrific if you think about it. So was it quite easy for you to turn the Peter Pan story into kind of this horror story?
I think it is a horror story, to be honest. I mean, there's so much killing in it. There's so much killing, and there's so much fighting and battle, and people lose their limbs. And Wendy gets made into a sort of weird housemaid, indentured servant, and it's very odd. And it's you know the price of and the parents are extraordinarily negligent. It's already about um, unloved children already, and the idea of flying away from your indifferent home is built into it. It didn't seem that much of a leap. I didn't take, as I said, that much plot,
Yeah.
verbatim from the novel, but the feeling of it is so, like, I don't understand in a way how it's a children's book. I really don't.
Well, but if you look at a lot of but especially like the 80s, like cartoons and the grim fairy tales, all those kind of things, they're all really
Roald
sadistic.
Dahl, yeah.
Roald Dahl, yeah, I love Roald, I
Yeah,
love Roald
that,
Dahl.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, well, there you go. So violence and kind of fear and brutality is kind of seems to be kind of inherent in some way or built in, or people perceive it as built into childhood.
Hmm.
Um, and I suppose we, it's when you realize it's the first time you realize everything, isn't it? It's the first time you realize that um, you can be hurt, that other people can be hurt by you, that
Hmm.
you can die, and that other people can die. And
Yeah.
I mean, the enormity of those realizations is, I mean, is like monumental.
Hmm. Definitely. Um, but I mean, the reason I asked you that was because obviously certain people may probably associate Peter Pan with kind of more kind of child fiction. So
Right, it's like cute, yeah.
those people that really love their adult horror, I just
Mm.
kind of wanted you to kind of pitch it to them so that they would understand that it is inspired by Peter Pan, but it's very, very much a lot darker than they might imagine it would be.
I mean, well, as I said, anyone who's actually read Peter Pan will be like, oh, yeah, 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 that'll do.
Yeah.
But even if you haven't read Peter Pan, um, I think there is definitely an intersection with Lord of the Flies here as well,
Hmm.
which is just almost, it might be a perfect book, Lord of the Flies, genuinely. Like, I think there are very few of them around, but I think it's it's very economical, and just from start to finish it takes you on this horrific journey, which is so incredibly believable. And I think they have a lot more to do with each other than one might normally think, those two novels. And I'm just like riding on their coattails and pointing it out.
Hmm.
But I think that's the thing, is Peter Pan is not cute. It is horrific, actually.
Hmm. Yeah. I love the fact that you said that the Roll of Flies was economical. I'm quite curious how you approach making sure your books are economical.
Well, I'm very glad. Thank you for saying that.
No,
I'm,
but the fact that you picked up on
yeah.
that in the Lord of the Flies, I imagine that's something that you're very kind of self-conscious about as well when you're writing your books.
Yeah, I mean, less is always almost always more. I'm I always write under, I always my first and second draft are always far short of the eventual length, and sometimes my editor is like, uh,
Yeah.
more, and I'm like, oh, okay. But I think well, there's the old aphorism, isn't there? Like show don't tell. And I think that's fine. But sometimes with books you have to tell. Um, I do think that there is a horror in telling something with brevity.
Yeah.
If you tell something in a very short and abbreviated manner, particularly if it's something horrific, it becomes even more horrific.
Yeah,
Um,
just recently I've been reading some flash fiction,
oh
and
yeah,
there's some incredibly visceral and very, very sort of,
yeah.
yeah, you can really picture it in your mind, and it's a lot, it hits a lot harder than most
Exactly.
like 800, 900 page books. Yeah.
Yeah. Like so that's that famous one. It's attributed to Ernest Hemingway. Was it children's shoes for sale? Children's shoes never worn.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Yeah, I forgot about that one. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, I do write short stories as well, and I think oh, I can't remember who said it. I have no idea. But a novel has to be about a specific moments in time, but a short story has to contain the meaning of the universe.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's a generalization, but I get that. I understand it.
Yeah, no, I personally think it's a lot harder to write a story that's like 200, 300 words than maybe a novel sometimes
It absolutely
to
can
tell a
be.
story.
Yeah, I think it can be. I mean, they're very. I mean, short stories are great because they have a beginning, a middle, and an end. You can finish them, which is just when you're writing a novel, sometimes feels like a just unsurmountable task. But they are really very, very high and specific art. Yeah, yeah.
No, brilliant. Also, I wanted to ask a little bit about, I mean, obviously, I know you were born in Washington, D.C. You grew up in the US, Kenya, Madagascar, Yemen, Morocco,
I
studied at
did, yeah.
Oxford. So I'm quite curious how much of all of that different upbringing bleeds into your stories, especially this one, maybe
Well,
the setting.
I don't. I think most writers were lonely children.
Mm.
I think that's just built in. Um, I also like. I mean, because we moved every 3 years from the time I was three until I was at university. Actually, I'm not sure where I'm from.
Right.
I'm really not. I speak like this but that's because I went to
Yeah, you
drama
got,
school.
right. Yeah, you got a very British accent. Yeah, yeah.
Well, yeah, but when I was living in America, I spoke an American accent. When I was living in Madagascar, I went to a French school and I spoke French all day.
Right.
You chameleonize and it's, I don't, I wouldn't change it for the world because I saw such amazing things. I was so lucky, like, coral reefs and lemurs climbing all over you and keeping chameleons in the garden. And I wouldn't change it for the world, but it's definitely an unmoored, um, existence.
Yeah, because you're so malleable at a young age, I imagine all those different
And,
things coming at you from different angles have just shaped you in a very different way to a
and it's
normal
before the
childhood.
internet it's before the internet as well. So you
Yeah,
can't take a friend if you have friends in Kenya, you're not going to take that friendship
sure.
over to
Yeah.
Madagascar, are you? So every stage of your life is kind of like you know sort of uh, divided into 3 year segments,
Mm.
and there is a sort of a guillotine that comes down at the end of each one,
Yeah.
um, and the only constant is your family.
Right.
So I think I have a real affinity um, for these kind of very, very loving but also very intense relationships in isolated environments. I think that's where that comes from, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, I imagine that definitely shines through in the book. No War Burning, definitely. Yeah.
Mm.
Was that something that was you felt actually kind of playing on your mind? Something that you were maybe reminiscing about while you're writing this one?
Well, I think it runs. There's a sort of thread that runs through all my books. It's like isolation and these very like a dependence on these very limited few personal relationships that become so important that they actually can tip over into obsession or horror, because all I had was my family, and of course, I mean everything I do is obviously straight autobiography,
Yeah.
um, but I know what it feels like to just have three other people, the only three other people in the world who understand where you've been and where you're coming from, and they are going to be there in 3 years' time. It's very intense. As I said, I'm not doing what a friend of mine calls whining on the yacht. I really like, an amazing upbringing, but it had a quality of loneliness and intensity that I think makes its way into the books. Yeah.
Really brilliant. But just before I let you go, I love to ask also the authors that I speak to how much input they give when it comes to the artwork. I mean, the artwork here is very, very unique and particular for this one because of the world that you've created there. I mean, I love, especially the cover where we can see these people walking through the flames. It's fantastic, and I love the broken binding edition. I'll be grabbing a copy of that as soon as I can.
Beautiful, isn't it? Oh my God,
it's fantastic. I've got quite a few broken binding books, and they're so good. I love it. But how involved are you in terms of the artwork of your books?
I mean, the short answer is not at all. And
unless most people say, yeah.
Unless I really, really hate it. But actually, with that cover that you're describing, I was kind of bowled over actually when I saw it, because it captured exactly what I wanted the book to be. There's this sort of almost like like old school kind of adventure feel to it.
To me, it was like a cross between, like you said, like a Famous Five book, but at the same time, there was also kind of a Cannibal Ferox type 80s, that kind of vibe as well. So it was kind of the terror and the kids' adventure book at the same time. Yeah.
It was. I think of all the covers I've had, I think that's probably the one that's, with the first pass, just went instantly to the heart of it. I was just like, yes, that's it. That's exactly what I wanted. It's got this, kind of almost like, as you say, like Hardy Boys, kind of like famous, like like old, like children, like adventure feel, but also with the clear like feel and atmosphere that all is not well. And I've never really seen a cover quite like it, actually. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's fantastic. Like I said, I'm going to get hold of one of the broken binding ones with the spreads. It just looks fantastic. It was great. Yeah, it's brilliant. I love spreads.
So
my collection of spreads.
But there's two. So there's a Waterstones one, and the Waterstones spreads are a Ferris wheel and all these fairground things.
Oh right, I've not seen that one. I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then we've got the broken binding one, which is a beautiful landscape.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I imagine there's artwork as well. Is there more artwork inside the broken binding one? There's usually kind of end papers, or they usually have like.
Yeah, I'm sure. To be honest, I don't. I have less to do with this stuff than you think. I think there is. I mean, they're so good. They always produce such beautiful.
No, they're beautiful. The ones I got are fantastic. Yeah, I've got some with gold edges and stuff. They're fantastic. Yeah. Well, listen, just to finish off on a really, really lighter note, then.
Sure.
The last question I want to ask is, if you could drop one of your own characters that you've had before into the world of nowhere in this book, who would it be and what would they discover there?
A character from a different book?
From a different book. Who would you drop into Nowhere Burning, and what would they find there?
Oddly, I have instantly the answer came to my head, which I would never have imagined, because that's quite a difficult question. Olivia the cat from Needless Street would deal very well, I think, in Nowhere, because she can cope with anything. She's a great sort of quite satirical and disapproving, but very resourceful character. And she saves the day over and over and over again. I feel like she would, with a great deal of kind of, looking askance at things, kind of maybe sort everything out. In fact, if she was in the book, actually, maybe the book wouldn't exist at all, because she'd have fixed everything.
That's the next book you already written for you. Well, listen, Catriona, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, especially because you're half Polly. I appreciate you speaking to me.
Such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
And thank you so much for being such an open book about it as well. I appreciate your honesty. And I wish you the best of luck with the release. I'm sure it's going to go down really, really well. Like I said, I'm going to grab myself a book, the broken binding book, definitely. And I'm going to have a look online now for the Waterstones one, because I've not seen that yet. So yeah. And I wish you the best of luck, and I hope to speak to you again sometime soon.
And I hope so too. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time.